Hello everybody, this is your friendly friend Bon. I hope that you had some wonderful holidays and Happy New Year! For today, I have a very different video for you. Usually what I do in this channel is that I talk about movies or review movies that I find interesting. But for today, I want to do something different. I want to talk about the books that I read in 2022. Now, you might wonder, why am I doing this? Well, the thing is that many years ago when I was finally gathering the courage to start a YouTube channel, it was a big deal for me because I have always wanted to make videos for YouTube. So when I was thinking about what type of content I would like to make, I considered doing booktube. The problem is that what I read through the whole year, I just saw a video of someone being like, I read 11 books just this month. And I was baffled because I read 11 books just this year. So basically, when I realized that I would need to be reading at least 6-7 books every month just to be able to create content for booktube, I had to stop myself from doing it because 1, I do not read fast, 2, I don't have the money to buy that many books every month, and 3, I don't have the time to read that many books in 1 month. However, I am someone that I always like to try new things. And you know what? Maybe I cannot make monthly videos about what I read in each month. However, I can do a video about what I read through the whole year. And this is this video. As I mentioned before, I read 11 books this year, and I won't be reviewing them in any particular order. I just know that I left my favorite book of the year for last. So the first book that I will be talking about, it's a very, very special book to me, and that is The Picture of Dorian Gray by none other but Oscar Wilde. In case you have no idea what The Picture of Dorian Gray is about, it is the story of a portrait. We start the story with Basil, who is a painter and a very close friend of Dorian Gray. Basil has painted the most beautiful portrait of Dorian. It's described in the book like it is this masterpiece that just transmits how beautiful and pure Dorian is. This portrait is so infinitely beautiful that even Basil thinks that it would be a curse on the world just to let them see this portrait because people would feel hypnotized by it. It's so beautiful that it can damage people. I'm not joking, I'm just kind of resuming what Basil feels when he's looking at this portrait that he painted. So as Basil is just looking at this painting and thinking about what is he going to do, Lord Henry comes along. Lord Henry is someone that has a very kind of destructive thinking if you don't know how to manage it. I don't want to spoil anything in case you have not read it, but Lord Henry is not the best influence. And later, Dorian joins them just to pick up his portrait. The thing is that Lord Henry might not be the best influence because he can be very careless with his words and how his words affect others. So as Dorian is contemplating his portrait, Lord Henry starts talking about how, beauty never lasts, and that as soon as Dorian loses his beauty, no one is going to like him or love him like they do now. And obviously, this conversation is much more complicated and goes much deeper. But the thing is that Lord Henry's words become seeds in Dorian's mind, and he starts going down a path that just ends up taking him to a horrible road. And I think that a really big misconception about this book is that people think that the deal with the devil, or the deal that Dorian makes with the portrait, is that the portrait ages, but Dorian stays young. But that's not what happens. The Dorian in the portrait is Dorian's soul. So as Dorian starts going down this awful path that I mentioned, the Dorian in the portrait starts decaying because the state of his soul is decaying, not that it is aging. And first and foremost, I adore the meaning and the metaphors and the symbolism in this book. I think it's absolutely gorgeous, and I'm really happy because the thing with this book is that when I was 15, in my literature class, I got assigned this book to make a book report. It was you just need to take out a paper and you will see the name of a book and you needed to read and make a book report about that book. And I got The Portrait of Dorian Gray. And the thing is that around that time is when I began reading more mature literature, more grown-up stuff, we can say. I was starting to read a lot of Stephen King, and I was also reading Carlos Ruiz Zafón, which his books are amazing if you have not read them. And I just remember that I enjoyed that book so deeply that it was around that time when I have read the most that I have read in my entire life. And that's part of what that book did to me. Like, that book showed me a world and showed me a new genre. And I just fell in love with reading. Like, I had so much fun reading that book. And so many years later, many years later, last Christmas, I saw this beautiful cloth-bounded version of The Portrait of Dorian Gray, and I just remember how much I loved the book, and so obviously, I wanted this version. And my mom heard me, and she got me this copy for Christmas last year, and this was one of the first books that I read this year, and I had just as much fun. I love this book just as much as I loved it when I was younger, and I think that I found it even more meaningful than I did when I was 15, because obviously it's been like a decade since then, more than a decade since I read this book for the first time. And now that I'm much older now, I feel like I appreciated this book and its meaning even more now. So I give this book 5 out of 5 stars. I adored it, and I think it's a classic that is not as mentioned as other classics. And I'm even surprised that not many people have been interested in just adapting this book into the big screen, into a movie, because it's a great story. The next book that I will be talking about, it was a book that I think it was very popular last year, and that is The X-Talk by Rachel Lynn Solomon. Now, the story of The X-Talk is the story of Shay and Dominic Yoon. Shay Goldstein has been a producer at her Seattle public radio station for nearly a decade, and she cannot imagine working anywhere else. But lately, it's been a constant clash between her and her new colleague, Dominic Yoon, who's fresh off a journalism master's program and convinced he knows everything about public radio. So from what I read, Dominic and Shay do not get along at all. And what happens is that this radio station is really struggling, so they are trying to come up with ideas to attract a new audience. And what happens is that Shay proposes that they should do a podcast, like a radio show where a couple of exes answer the public questions and start talking why their relationship failed, and through their failure try to help other people fix their relationships. However, the whole idea, it's great, but the execution can be complicated because you need to find a couple that are now exes willing to work together, and also that they are charming and have experience in radio, and that can be very difficult to find, and this radio station does not have the time to start casting this couple. And so the boss, as he's watching Shay and Dominic practically arguing at this meeting, he decides that Shay and Dominic should fake they are exes and do this show. And I have a very complicated relationship with this book because I liked it, but this book has something that I really do not like in contemporary romance nowadays, and this is why I'm finding so difficult to find new romances that I like. And it is that these books can be really horny. And I'm not talking about that this book has a lot of smut and spicy stuff. No, my problem with this type of books nowadays is that something very emotional can be happening, and one of the two leads will be like, oh, but he's so hot and I'm so wet. Because that's the thing, while Shay really doesn't like Dominic because he's young and he thinks that he's a know-it-all, he's also like tall and super fit and super handsome. So she's like, oh, I hate you, but you're so hot. And that's a trope that I'm really tired of. I really want a romance book that focuses more on the emotional journey and not so much on how hot one of the characters are or how wet someone is between the legs. I don't know. Ironically, that really turns me off in a romance novel. And so that's the only really complaint that I have about this book, because beside that, I really enjoy the characters. I thought that they were very cute. And something great that this book has is that personally, I love the ending of this book. It just felt so fitting. It felt like coming full circle inside the book, and it just made me happy about these two characters. So I'm giving The X-Talk 4 out of 5 stars. I would have loved to give these like a 4.5, but again, this can be, Shay can be too horny at times, and I don't appreciate that as much nowadays. Now, the next book is another very popular book from a very popular author, and that is People We Meet on Vacations by Emily Henry. The story is about Poppy and Alex and Poppy. These two have been best friends since they met in college, despite being polar opposites. However, something happened 2 years ago, like in the book time, something happened 2 years ago that made Alex and Poppy stop talking. And so when Poppy needs to find new inspirations because she feels very unhappy with her life, and she just knows that this unhappiness has a lot to do with the fact that Alex is not in her life anymore, she decides to fake a trip so they can go on together and she can try to recover her friendship with Alex and try to make things better with him. And that's basically like a very resumed version of this book. And this book, I don't know if maybe the hype got to me or what happened, but I think that this book was okay. I mean, I can see why people praise Emily Henry so much, and her writing is really good. It's so comfortable to read. I just felt cozy and comfortable reading her books, and that's why I get all the praise that she receives, and she deserves it. I think it's more of a me thing, because I think like the dynamic between Poppy and Alex was that Poppy was trying too hard and Alex was not sure if he wanted to be there or not, which creates a great conflict. There's someone who doesn't know what he wants, and there's another person that she just wants to do everything to make him think that he wants to be there. That's a great conflict. That's a great dynamic. However, sometimes I just felt like nothing really was happening. Like more things happen in the memories, because through the book, there's chapters where you can see what happened during their first trip together, during their second trip together, until you finally get to the trip where the incident happened and you can finally read what happened between them. I also like that structure of the book. That was really interesting. I like that a lot. But in the present, I just felt like nothing big was happening. Nothing that made me feel like, ooh, that's like squishy cool feeling that you sometimes get when you read romances. I only got that feeling from the last, I think, 100 pages, 90 last pages. I was feeling like that. Another thing that I really liked about this book is that the ending was realistic. I just love it, because I think that sometimes in romance and books in general are escapism. So I understand when things that wouldn't really happen in real life happen in books, because that's the point. I mean, if I wanted to read something super realistic, I would read autobiography or something like that. So I understand that. But this book, I felt like it did a really realistic ending that made me feel like, okay, I can see that happening. I can connect with that type of ending. So overall, this is a good book. Absolutely it is. I just feel like when I was reading the present time in the book, I just felt underwhelmed. Maybe, again, as I said at the start of this review, maybe the hype got me and I was just waiting for this intense romance, and it was really slow burn. It was really slow at times, and maybe that affected my perception of this book. So I give People We Meet on Vacations 3.5 stars out of 5. I'm just realizing that I read so much romance this year. Well, last year now, 2023 already. So the next book that I read, it was Star-Crossed by Minnie Dorky. Now, this is like shorter than other books that I read this year, but I just had so much fun reading this book. I think that it was one of my favorite books that I read this year. So what happens is that when Justine Carmichael bumps into her first crush, Nick Jordan, after a decade apart, she knows she cannot leave her future happiness to chance. This time, she's going to give fate a helping hand. An aspiring journalist at a local magazine, Justine knows that Nick always reads its horoscope section. What harm could come from making a few alterations to the Aquarius entry over the next few weeks, just to push him in the right direction? So as I said, Justine just starts rewriting Nick's horoscope and try to give him hints to make him act the way she wants him to act. However, and this is the funny part, everybody is different, and Justine sometimes writes things that she thinks Nick will interpret it in one way, But what really happens is that he has his own interpretation of things, and he and he ends up gathering a different conclusion from what Justine wants. And so she just cannot seem to get her way. This was just a very short but a very, very fun read. I was having a blast reading this book, and whenever Justine had to rewrite the horoscope, I was just like, oh my god, what's gonna happen next now that she wrote that? And that's great. That's a great dynamic, and I really, really love this book. And I think that this is not as popular as it should be, because nowadays I think that more people than ever believe in horoscopes, and I'm very surprised that no one is interested in reading a book about a girl manipulating the horoscope to try to see if she can get her crush to ask her out. It's just so funny. The only thing about this book is that the ending is really, 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 really cheesy. That's the only thing that I have to say about this book, because overall, I really liked it. So I give Star-Crossed by Minnie Darky. I think that I'm pronouncing that incorrectly, but I'm giving Star-Crossed by Minnie Darky a 4.5 out of 5 stars. Now, the next book I think is a BookTube community baby. I just remember that the BookTube community was going crazy over it, and so I ordered it, and that is This Is How You Lose the Time War by Max Gladstone. So This Is How You Lose the Time War is the story of Red and Blue. Both of them are time-traveling agents that are trying to alter history so each other's sides win. However, Red and Blue are in love with each other, and so they leave notes for each other, and they basically have like this Juliet and Romeo dynamic between them. So I don't really like fantasy, but I really, really enjoy sci-fi. And so when I heard the news that there was this book about two time-traveling agents that were trying to alter history, but they were in love with each other even if they were not supposed to be, like it was impossible for them to be together, I was like, give that book to me. I want the angst, I want the adventure, I want the sci-fi, I want the conflict, I want everything. So when this book arrived, I immediately noticed something that worried me, and it was that this book is incredibly thin. So obviously I was worried. How are you going to tell me about this impossible romance and time travelers trying to complete their missions in such a short span of pages? And my worries were confirmed, because this was the biggest disappointment that I had this year. It has been such a long time since I was so disappointed with a book. Like, I was so excited for this book, and when I discovered that this book is written in a very metaphorical and flowery form, I just wanted to throw the book to the other side of the room. Because the thing is that this book is written in such a way that I have no idea what was happening at any given moment. I cannot tell you what happened in this book. One, I don't think that now I remember. And I remember when I finished the book, I was like, what happened? Like, what even happened? I have no idea. It's just like you're writing like very poetic love notes for each other, and that's it, because I have no idea what was going on. And I was so angry because the premise of this book was so good and I was so excited. No joke, I was expecting like a big book. I thought that this was going to be like a Bible. I was expecting a book that if I hit someone in the head with it, I would knock them out. I was waiting for that kind of book. But no, I just received like a poem. You know what? This is basically a poems book. I would describe it as that. I think that Rupi Kaur's poem book is like longer than this. If you like really poetic lyricism and flowery writing, I just think that you will enjoy this book. As for me, I think that I got sold one thing and I ended up with another. So I'm giving This Is How You Lose the Time War 1 out of 5 stars. Now, the next book that I will be talking about, I think it's a book that it's not really well known. I have never seen this book outside of the Pinterest post where I found it. And I don't know, I just read the synopsis and I felt like I really wanted to read it. So the story of this book is that when she was like a young teenager, Amy Blue released a red balloon into the sky with her email and a secret, like she wrote a secret in there. And this boy around her age named Lucas found the book and he wrote to her and they began began talking and they became best friends. And now it has been years later and Emmy is obviously in love with Lucas. However, Lucas just proposed to his girlfriend and he's going to get married. And so what is Emmy Blue going to do now that the love of her life is about to marry someone else? It is that kind of premise, and I remember when I was reading the description of this book, someone mentioned that it was like Love Rosie, but with a twist. And so I was so ready to read that. And the only thing that I can say, and I want to say because I really don't want to spoil anything, is that I really like this book. So if I can say something without spoiling too much, is that I really like this book. This book was a very comfortable and easy reading. The writing is good. And I think that something these books does that I really, really liked is that we focus a lot on Emmy's character. And what I mean by this is that this book is not only about Emmy's feelings toward Lucas and everything that is happening towards the wedding, because you have that thing going on, but what happens is that Emmy has a lot of history behind her. And this book never forgets about that. This book is as much as the romance, as much of Emily's personal struggles and her personal history with herself and how is she finding her past as she's trying to move forward. And I just think that this book really balance all of those elements really well, because as you can see, this is not a really big book. So this is a romance book that I really, really would recommend to absolutely everyone who just enjoys romance in general. I mean, there's obviously things that I would have done differently or that I wish they were done differently in the book. But again, I don't want to say anything because there's a lot of secrets and things going on in this book and I don't want to spoil anything. So I give Dear Emma Blue by Leah Lewis 4 out of 5 stars. Jesus Christ. Talking so much is like running a marathon. The next book that I read was like a YA mystery, and it was The Honeys by Ryan La Sala. So the synopsis of this book goes: Mars has always been the lesser twin, the shadow to his sister Caroline's radiance. But when Caroline dies under horrific circumstances, Mars is propelled to learn all he can about his once inseparable sister, who had grown tragically distant. There is one thing with this book, and it is that it has one of the most gripping opening scenes that I have read in a book in a very long while. So what happens is that Mars is asleep on his bed when he feels like someone is climbing up on top of him. And so he wakes up and what he sees is Caroline, his sister, all covered in mud and stains and leaves, and it looks like she just ran through the whole entire forest. Because the thing is that Caroline was not supposed to be there. She was supposed to be in a summer camp like so many miles away. So why is she there and why does she look like that? And so as Mars tries to ask her what's happening, the only thing Caroline says is, "I'm sorry," and she starts hitting Mars with this heavy object till the point that she breaks his fingers and she almost breaks his skull. So while Mars is trying to defend his life and is trying to escape from Caroline, Caroline is eventually pushed and thrown down a balcony and she falls down and dies. And that's the opening scene. That's chapter 1, page 1 of this book. It's so intense, and the way that it's written and it is described, it's amazing. I remember that I read that and I was so ready to keep going on. I just wanted to know what happened. I just remember reading that scene and I was like, I need to know more. What happens next? What happened with Caroline? Why did she try to kill her twin? What happens next is that Mars' parents are just basically trying to hide what happened. They're saying that what happened to Caroline was a tragic accident, and also Mars had another accident, and that's why he looks like shit. So the parents do not want to tell anyone that Caroline tried to kill Mars, because apparently they are these very public persons and they do not want to have like a bad image, like why one of your children try to kill the other. So basically, Mars is on his own trying to discover what happened to Caroline, because since his parents are trying to keep this all a secret and have called this an accident, he cannot go to the authorities or the police, and he cannot get any help on trying to find out what happened to his sister. Because the thing is that Mars is super sure that something happened to Caroline in this summer camp. for her to try to kill him. Like, it was not a normal thing. And he is so sure about this because he also used to go to that summer camp until there was an incident years back and he stopped going to said camp, and that was when Caroline and him got distant from each other. So against his better judgment, Mars decides to go back to this camp and try to find the answers about what happened to Caroline in there. All up to this point, I bet that this book is sounding really interesting. However, I'm going to tell you the issue of this book. The issue of this book is that it has no freaking balance, because it is stated pretty early on the book that there is something else, something almost paranormal going on with what happened to Caroline. And the thing is that, and I have not mentioned this on purpose, is that Mars is a gender fluid person. And so when I refer to this struggle to balance topics, is that you have been established that there is something wrong going on. There's something else going on. However, when Mars arrives at this camp, that is obviously interesting to read, right? Like how someone who is gender fluid can really be in a place that is so binary, that is boys or girls, and that's it. And that is Mars' struggle with his identity. However, you will spend the next 200 pages of this book reading about those struggles than the mystery. So reading this book was very frustrating for me because for the next 200 pages, while it was interesting to read about Mars' experiences as a gender fluid person in this place, I wanted to know what the hell was happening in this camp. What happened to Caroline? What's the secret? What's going on? And you spend so much time of this book not knowing anything about the mystery, and it's almost like the mystery doesn't exist. I think that it is on the last 100 pages when the book goes back to the mystery, but by then your attention is somewhere else. You're like, oh, right, that was a thing, I guess. This book had everything to be fantastic. It had the synopsis, it had the topics, like main character with struggles and complications, and and a personal engagement with why he needed to discover what was going on. Like, he was personally invested in the issue, and the lack of balance in these topics really killed it, because you just want to know about the mystery, but you're reading about other things, and when you go back to the mystery, it's like kind of too late. This lack of balance really killed it. But for me, as I said, for me it was just frustrating because I just wanted to know what the hell happened to Caroline and what was going on with this camp, and it took me so long to get there. So I am giving The Honeys by Ryan LaSala a 2 out of 5 stars. 4 more books, let's go. The next book is another book that was very popular, and it was They Both Die at the End by Adam Silvera. So in case you still don't know what this book is about, because this was very popular, in the reality of this book is that on planet Earth there is now this system where someone will call you at midnight, 1 a.m. and they will announce you that you are going to die that day. They do not tell you at what time or how. They just tell you that you're gonna die that day. And so we follow Mateo and Rufus. And so in this book we follow Mateo and Rufus. They are 2 teenagers with very complicated lives, and they get the call that they're going to die that day. And so this system, because again, this whole thing of calling you to announce you're dead is very common in here, and so there are many systems and like government programs now that they handle your last day in case you want to do something very specific. And so through this app that is called Last Friend, Mateo and Rufus meet each other and they decide to spend their last day together. For such an intense premise, for me, this book was very boring. I'm guessing that knowing that you are going to die that day can be really stressing, but it felt like all these 2 characters did throughout the whole book was running away from people, running to places, and stressing about everything. I feel like these 2 people didn't enjoy their last day on Earth at all, and I didn't enjoy this book at all either because of that. I don't know, I was just expecting much more about this book, and at the end I was just like maybe skimming a little bit through certain pages just to try to find out how they were going to die, because I feel awful saying this, but the only thing that keep me reading this book was that I wanted to know how they died. That was the only reason why I was keep reading despite being very bored. And so I don't know. I can see why people like this book. I can see why people cry with this book. If you manage to connect with the characters and their stories, this can become a very personal book. I can give that to this book. And the cover is absolutely gorgeous. I love that the clouds are forming like the face of death. I really like that. It's a very, very cool cover. But it was certainly not a book for me. So I'm giving They Both Die at the End a 2 out of 5 stars. The book that I'm going to be talking about now, it's the last book that I read on 2022. And that is I Hope You Get This Message by Farah Naz Rishi. And this is the story of 3 teenagers. It was Kate, Adim, and Jesse, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, Kate, Jesse, and Adim. I hope that I am pronouncing Adim correctly. And so what happens with these characters is that when the news starts reporting that Earth has become contacted by a planet named Alma, rumors fly that the alien entity is giving civilization only a week before they hit the kill switch. Obviously, when you only have 7 days and you have 3 teenagers with troubled stories, all of these 3 teenagers have things that they need to deal with, they have things that they have not accomplished and they wanted to accomplish, or just personal problems that they want to resolve. So this book was incredibly promising, and I also love the cover. I'm not gonna lie, I picked this up because of the cover, and then I read the premise and I was like, oh, that sounds so interesting. I love personal development, I love personal drama, I love heavy emotions. I just like to see the emotions developing in a book. I really adore that. So this book sounded just like right on my alley. However, I did not enjoy it as much as I thought it would, and it's because this book can get repetitive at times. And I feel like one of the 3 characters really didn't have like personal development. And I really don't want to say what's the deal with each of the characters, because I feel that it's something that you start to discover as you go on with the character. So I really do not want to spoil that. But sometimes it felt like nothing was happening. Again, it was just like what happened with They Both Die in the End. The Earth is ending in 7 days. What are you going to do throughout those 7 days? Well, this book really does develop how chaotic everything is becoming thanks to this news. It didn't felt like the pressure was there. Like sometimes this character would just wander and do nothing and just like stay inside their feelings for far too long, to the point that there were chapters that it felt so repetitive. Like the characters were just like almost saying the same stuff that they had said 30 pages ago. Like, you only have 7 days to achieve all of these. What are you going to do it? And that pressure, I didn't feel it in this book. It really felt super slow. For a book about the Earth ending, it felt pretty boring. I didn't feel like the characters had any urgency in achieving what they wanted to do. They were just like, oh yeah, I have always wanted to do this or resolve this thing in my life, so I'm going to get lost for like a whole day without doing nothing much. Sometimes it got like that, and it was so, it was frustrating for me, because it was like, babies, the Earth is ending in 7 days. Chop chop, do stuff. Again, there is one character in this book that I really don't want to mention who, because I don't want to spoil anything, but it was impossible for me to connect with them, and I felt like there was no character development with them, which is weird because, like, I don't know, you think that they would discover a lot, right? If they're trying to achieve something that they have never been able to, you would think that they would discover things about themselves, but it was not the case. And so, I mean, if you want to read it, if this sounds like you would like it, I would suggest to give it a try, because sometimes I feel like these books that focus so much on the inner conflict of a character, it depends from person to person if they like the book or they don't. So, I mean, I'm still recommending this book because, I don't know, I'm just sure that a lot of people will like this book. And so I'm giving I Hope You Get This Message by Farah Naz Rishi 2.5 out of 5. I cannot believe that we are on the last 2 books. Let's do it. I just realized that you can see the books. No, you will know which book was my favorite of the year. You cannot know that, and I'm not going to record this again. It has been like 2 hours. So the almost last book that I will be talking about today, it is Meet Me in Paradise by Livy Hafsher. This is the story of Maureen. Maureen is a woman whose mother, a very famous and adventurous journalist, dies. She decides to always play it safe, especially because she now is in charge of her younger sister, Sadie. However, Sadie is as adventurous as her mother. She is a photographer and she travels around the world to these exotic locations to just take pictures. So she's always going to these crazy adventures, while Marine stays at home and lives her normal life. So what happens is that Sadie is tired of watching her sister throw her entire life away and never really experiencing life. And so Sadie convinces Marine that they should go together to this trip to this wonderful and beautiful island that is called Saba. And against her own good judgment, Marine agrees. However, and this is another however, I'm using however a lot, but however, Sadie had a plan in mind. And what she does is that she tricks Marine into getting into that airplane, and Sadie never arrives to the airport. Meaning that now Marine is heading to this island so many miles and hours away from home all on her own. And what I have not told you is that this is a romance book. Obviously, Meet Me in Paradise. What do you think? This is a romance. So obviously, in the airplane, Marine gets to know Lucas. Lucas is the owner of this incredibly hotel where Marine is staying. And so things get interesting from then on. I have a very complicated relationship with this book because I hated the first half and then I loved the second half. Okay, so the thing is that there is this trope in romance where I don't know why it happens, but hello, new outfit, new day, my camera died and I had to charge it again, but that took like a couple of hours and by then I didn't have time for a week and a half. This video was supposed to come out on the first Thursday of January, but as you can see, that was not the case, but I'm finally here, I'm finally filming this, so let's get into it. Let's keep talking about Meet Me in Paradise. Now, this book has something, a trope, a romance trope that I really don't like, and I have never understood why people find it appealing and why we are not questioning it. And I'm talking about the trope that when you have two romantic leads, one is super nice and they're just trying to have the most peaceful relationship with the second person, but the second person is mean and insufferable and they're always whining and they're always complicating things just because they have an internal fight. But that internal fight is not like, oh, I can understand the emotional struggle. It's just like you're being ridiculous and complicating everything just because. And the reason that I don't like it is that why would you fall in love with someone who is being mean to you? Maybe it's a personal thing, but I just do not like characters that are like that. So you have someone who's mean and someone who's nice. I can understand how and why the mean one would fall in love with the nice one, but I will never understand, and I have never understood, why would you like or just find reasonable that the nice one falls in love with someone who is being so mean to them? I just don't see it. Like, they are not treating you right. Why would you fall in love with them? And for half of this book, Marine is like that. And Lucas is just being extra nice to her. Like, he is personally taking her to see the island and taking her into these very exclusive tours around the island. Like, he's being so nice to her that he upgraded her room to this villa where she can see the sea from her window. That's just how nice Lucas is being to her. And instead of just being grateful and going along with everything, Marine just acts very mean towards Lucas. Like, she's always whining and talking about how she doesn't like to do those things, and I understand that's the conflict. I understand that Marine is very, very, very far away from her comfort zone and she doesn't want to be there and she just wants to go back home, and then her passport disappears and she's just like even more worried about how she is going to go back home. I get it, but the thing is that it doesn't feel like, for half of the book, it doesn't feel like Marine is enjoying anything. Like, at one point she is proud that she is doing those things and she's like watching these beautiful places, but those moments are so brief that by the moment Marine falls for Lucas, I cannot believe how Lucas fell for Marine. During that first half of the book, every single moment between Marine and Lucas is she whining She enjoys an activity for like literally one page and then she goes back to whining and talking about how she doesn't want to be there. By the time each other have basically fallen for each other, I can understand why Marine fell for Lucas, but I cannot understand why Lucas fell for Marine. Like, he falls so hard for her that when we reach that conflict point in relationships in these books, you know, when it seems that the relationship is going to be over because something happened, when we reach that point, Lucas is so angry and he's just like throwing stuff around the room, like not to Marine, like all on his own. Like, he's so angry with him and what happens that he just like you know, like drops everything from his desk and he's so angry. I cannot believe that he just fell so hard for her, that he has that reaction. But then in the second half of this book, there is a plot twist. I saw it coming, kind of. I saw coming half of the plot twist. The other half, I didn't see it coming. And by that time, I really started to adore the relationship between Lucas and Marine. And I was crying at the end of this book. This book made me cry. I don't know if I was very sensible. I don't know what happened, but I was crying by the end of this book. And that's why I have a very complicated relationship with this book, because the first half I didn't like it, but the second half, it just made it all better. And I'm just glad that I kept reading, because for one moment I ponder upon the idea of stop reading this book and just move on to the next. And I'm glad that I didn't do that, because you know, it was just nice. And the ending, it's so sweet. I think the ending is kind of cheesy, but not as cheesy, like enjoyably cheesy, we can say. You can enjoy this cheesiness. I can feel myself with that type of cheesiness. And so if someone asked me for a romance, I think that I would recommend Meet Me in Paradise 100%. I would. It's just like a nice book. I feel like I always say about that. Like, it's a nice book. I just feel bad bad talking books. I'm like, no, it's a nice book. But yeah, I give Meet Me in Paradise 3.8 out of 5 stars. And now, the last but not least, my favorite book of the year. The last one that I'll be reviewing in this video is More Than We Can Tell by Brigitte Kemmerer. Brigitte Kemmerer. This book gave me absolutely everything that I was looking for in a romance. I have been looking for a romance like this for years. Like, personally, I have wanted this for years. I have bought so many romantic, contemporary romantic YA books, whatever you want to call it. I have read so many of them. And you know, I found some nice romance, some mellow romances, some surprising romances that I was not expecting to like them as much as I did. But they were not it. They were not what I was specifically looking for. And this book gave that to me. So this is a YA romance, and it is about Rev and Emma. They're going through very heavy stuff, and so they meet amidst these complications, like these issues that they're going through. And for example, Emma likes coding and she has been working on this video game, and she doesn't have a good relationship with her mother, and she kind of idolizes her absent father. And so it happens that one day she starts being harassed by someone inside her video game, to the point that she actually starts fearing for her own life in the real world. And then we have Rev. Rev is an adopted kid, and in a span of a couple of days, 2 very important things happen. Number 1, he gets a letter from his abusive biological father, which terrifies him because it means that he had found him. And the second thing that happens is that his parents take in a foster kid, a very problematic kid that has been through many houses, and Rev cannot help himself from feeling identified with this kid. And so obviously these 2 things start affecting Rev a lot, because it's basically like his past is coming to knock on his door and he is not ready for that. And as you can see, this is kind of like a big book for a YA romance, but it is because the relationship between Emma and Rev is actually developed, and they become kind of like a safe haven for each other. And as you can see, this is like a kind of like a thick book for a YA romance, but it is because the issues in this book, I feel like they are properly fleshed. You can say that this book could have gone much deeper, and they could have fleshed things more, but I think that this book just fleshed things enough to make it a good book. I fell in love with Rev, I fell in love with Emma, I fell in love with their relationship, and the problems felt real. I 100% believe that two kids right now in the world are going through the things that Emma and Rev are going through, and I absolutely adore that. And I really do not want to talk a lot about this book because this book is obviously very character focused. And so the most important thing about this book is getting to know Emma and Rev and their problems and how they feel about them and what they are trying to do about their problems. And it just feels real, and I love that. And I really do not want to ruin that experience for anyone by talking too much about it. But yeah, and actually for me, this book was amazingly a 4.8 out of 5. And you know why this doesn't have 5 out of 5 stars? Because this book does one of those things that is because something really big happens at the end of this book. And after that, we get just like a couple more pages of Rev and Emma, and I wanted more. I wanted more of them. I just wanted a little bit more. Just like the ending felt like, no, like you could have written like something more, something, please. And I get it, like the ending is very sweet and it leaves a lot to the imagination, and you're just like, oh my god, these two. But I just wish that we could have seen more of them together, like really finally together. And that's my only complaint about this book. But that's not the end of the video. I'm gonna be telling you my TBR for these at least like first months, because I know that it's going to take me months to read these books. And talking about Bridget Kemmerer, I feel like I'm butchering her name so badly, but I'm sorry, Bridget. I'm so sorry. You're precious. I love you. I love this book. So I'm sorry if I'm butchering your name. If you ever get to see this, I feel like authors do not see this, but I'm saying sorry anyway. And I just like this book so much that I decided to order another of her books. And for that, I ordered her most popular book, the book that everyone likes. And that is Letters to the Lost. I ordered on Amazon. It's not here yet, but it's supposed to be here on Saturday. I hope that's true. I mean, it doesn't matter because I'm reading something else anyway, but I hope it arrives on Saturday. And apparently Letters to the Lost is not as romance focused as More Than We Can Tell, but it's very similar. And a lot of people usually like more Letters to the Lost. Blah, blah, blah. And apparently people like Letters to the Lost better than More Than We Can Tell because it focuses more on the character journey more than in the romance. And so let's see how I feel about that. I hope that the experience of reading it is as wonderful as More Than We Can Tell. Now, right now, actually, today is January 9th. As today, I am reading My Dark Vanessa. This is a very heavy book about a teacher grooming a student. This book is about Vanessa, a girl who, when she was in high school, when she was 15, 16, she was groomed by her English teacher. And so through the book, you start seeing the past so you can learn how this relationship happened, and the present. Because in the present, another girl just came up with a post accusing the English teacher for grooming her when she was 15. Right now, I'm on page 84 and I cannot stop reading. I'm so into this book and it's just baffling to read. I have always known and believed and thought that grooming is an absolute hideous thing. But this is the first time that I have ever read something like this. I have never read a book about grooming. I have never read Lolita. I have never ever read fiction like that because I didn't find the appeal. Like it just felt icky to me. But this book was so recommended and everyone told me that it is very empathetic and that it just shows you a new perspective of just how bad grooming is. And I agree 100% because you are reading from the perspective of Vanessa, who is a victim, but you can see her thought process from when she was a kid, from now that she's 30 as an adult, and you just can see how deep the trauma goes, and that's blowing my mind. I'm baffled by this book and I just want to keep reading it. So I'll tell you what I think about it when I finish it. As of now, that's my opinion. Like review of 80 pages, small review. Another book that I have right now in my TBR is The Midnight Library by Matt Haig. This book has been in my TBR literally since it came out and everyone was raving about it, but I don't know why this book was so expensive. Whenever I managed to find it, it was so expensive and I wanted the hardcover because it sounded like it will be my type of book, and I was just so happy when I finally got my hands on it and in hardcover. I don't know, I might be reading this after my Dark Vanessa or not. I don't know. But I'm so happy that I'll finally be reading this book. And the last book that as of now I have in my TBR is Runaway Groomsman by Megan Quinn. I have no idea about her. I have no idea about this book or any of her books. I have never read anything by Megan Quinn, so I have no idea what I'm getting myself into. I just know that this seems to be like a very thick book, and I'm okay with that. I love the cover. The cover really caught my attention. I read the synopsis and then I saw in Goodreads that the rating was pretty decent, so I decided to give it a shot. So this is one of those books that I have no idea what I'm going to be thinking about it, and that's good. That's nice. It's nice sometimes going into a book without knowing how you are going to feel instead of already knowing, or at least being predisposed to hate it or to love it. I'm very excited about this one because this one will be a true surprise. But with that said, we finally reached the end of this video. Thank you so much for watching. Please remember that I am on Instagram, I am on Twitch, I am on Twitter, I am on TikTok. I'm everywhere. I'm sleeping under your bed at this point. Like anywhere on the internet, you can find me. I'm there. But with that said, this was your friendly friend Bon. Very glad to see you here, and I hope that you have a wonderful day, and I hope to see you on the next one.